get into it. So question one. In 2020, thousands of people marched and protested in the city of Portland demanding racial justice. Some protesters called for police reform. Others called for defunding to drastically shrink the size of the Portland police budget, while others called for complete abolition. Nearly 4 years later, some elected officials still think of police response when they hear the phrase public safety. At Imagine Black, we believe that definition is too narrow. My question, and let's start with you first, Mitch. What is your definition of community safety, and what is your plan to reimagine public safety? I'll let you go with your 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I'll start by kind of framing up how I view the world. I neglected to introduce the fact that I do have a PhD in economics. And the reason why that's important is because to answer this question, I want to divide the two types of economic systems that we have in this city as a choice between two worlds. One is, are we going to build a care economy, or are we going to build a violence economy and reproduce a violence economy? And so when we think about community safety, if your first go-to is that we need to throw a lot more money to the police budget and approach issues that are fundamentally a function of poverty, neglect, and disinvestment by adding more police and sort of responding with carceral solutions, then you are reproducing a violence economy. I think instead what we need to do to move forward is to make investments that make sure we have a place where everyone can go to at night and sleep inside, right? We need to have evidence-based approaches to drug addiction and mental health, not sort of a preformed punitive frame. And we need to be making investments that levelize historic injustices in this city. And I think that's the only way that we can build a care economy. I think it's going to become increasingly crucial as we get into a world where it's getting increasingly warmer, and we have extreme weather events, and we see our vulnerable populations bear the cost of that most, while those of us who have had it well off are able to kind of retreat indoors with AC. And so I'm a strong proponent of policies like social housing, which says we are going to own that building at the city. We are going to set the rent at 30% of your income, whatever your income is. Everyone can pay their fair share that way. That's a very direct way to house people. I also like the approach of community land trusts, so we can build wealth, particularly in the Black community that doesn't have any. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to repeat the question. So what is your definition of community safety, and what are your plans to reimagine public safety? 2 minutes starts now.
Okay, yeah, so I want to think about community safety as more than just the word safety, and think about it more as a more holistic view of health as a whole. And so for me, I do hear a lot of even candidates talk about public safety, and they mean police and funding the police. And as a person who was very active in the 2020 protests and helped design the route that went by the Columbia River Correctional Facility during one of the car protests that we did to kind of give the inmates some hope about, maybe abolishing the prisons or reforming the prison system. I really would like us to focus a lot more on reform and on just really caring for people. And so for me, that does look like Portland Street Response, that looks like housing and community resource centers. I really like the idea of commercial conversions into residential properties so that we can have these live-in services that are there for people, and it can be more of a communal living style. And then we're using the vacant office buildings that we have here in the city, so we have the highest rate of those in the nation. And so really looking at holistic styles of housing that are not trying to move people along and kind of like push them through this one-size-fits-all process, but really looking at them as an individual and asking, what does recovery look like for you? What does success look like for you? What does health look like for you? And allowing an individual to define that and take some accountability and agency in that process, so they're invested in it and they care about it and they're not feeling like they're just shoved into a box. I'm also really interested in permaculture and regenerative agriculture, and so have been working with a lot of the farms. We did a Portland Clean Energy tour, Portland Clean Energy Fund tour of some of the sites where work is being done, and one of them was Zinger Farms, which is doing a lot of work with the BIPOC community to help them learn restorative agriculture and own their own farms in and around the city to support Portland's food sustainability.
Thank you so much. Whew, that was great, y'all. We're gonna get into some open discussion. I have some follow-ups. Just to set the stage for the viewers, we have a new form of government here in Portland. There's a lot of different things we can dive into, but right now I want to zone in a little bit on some of the changes of power for the city council. So in the past, our commissioners would really focus on a bureau and they would get a chance to, dive in and shape the direction of a few bureaus. Now we're going to have a city manager with deputies, and really this role is going to focus a lot on policy. We also have so many more commissioners than we've had in the past. I'm really curious, maybe I'll go to you first. I'm curious if you can share a little bit more, because you mentioned economy, around your plans on how to fund this bold vision of really thinking about our community as a whole and care, and we talk about community safety. What are your plans and thoughts about how you can do that within the policy realm? Yeah.
It's a very good question. I think that when you have a situation where you have 12 city councilors now with a variety of experience who all campaigned in a more or less like harmonious way, maybe a less sort of mudslingy kind of way, you can enter a newly elected government with some relationships that have already been built. And for better or worse, I think that there is a lot of overlap on the issues that people care about in this race. We might disagree on some of the solutions, but I think we do, most of us want to solve the homelessness problem and to kind of like make our communities more resilient. And so I think there's huge opportunities to work collaboratively inside the committee system to bring forward a budget proposal or a policy proposal that says this is really important. It's going to have these benefits. And it might have a price tag right now, but there's 30 years of benefits here. And we need to be able to do that kind of cost-benefit analysis that has a life cycle to it. And right now, I think that when you run a bureau and you're working to get elected in the next cycle, you have a very short-term frame. And even the best of us can fall into that trap, right? So I think there's opportunities with this professional administration to kind of have that continuity. Those of us, we can take some big, bold swings at policy proposals and then kind of work together to figure out how to pay for it. There's $8.4 billion in the budget. I know that there is room in that budget to say, you know what, this thing that we tried over here didn't really yield any value. Let's see if we can stop that program and reallocate towards something that has a stronger community voice and uplifts some communities that have been left out. And let's take a swing on that. Let's see if we can provide some value. And so I think that there's gonna be some experimentation there. There's going to be some moments where we disagree, but one of the reasons I'm running is I do know how to sort of say, these are costs that you haven't included in this budget. These are benefits that you haven't included in this budget. Let's bring those together, and then we can say, this is how we invest in our future. And that, I think, will yield a more resilient city that can kind of make us, have better success in moving forward.
Thank you. I have a very similar question for you. Just due to your really strong background in climate justice, and you spoke about resiliency, there has been some conversations around rethinking and experimenting a little bit with our budget, especially when it comes to food systems. You mentioned the farm. Can you talk a little bit more about what the shift could look like and maybe what your plan is as it relates to community safety? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question and super important. So I think that it's really important to look at climate holistically and from every angle. From the, permaculture ethics is people care, earth care, fair share. And so there's sort of this idea of we need to make sure that everyone has enough. And so looking at food systems, I think we really as a city need to look at how do we import less food? How are we looking at our commercial grocery store situations and opting for more local options, and then working with zoning and with the rural areas outside of Portland to make sure that we're collaborating well with them and make sure that those are all equitable in terms of food sharing and availability. And then, in terms of paying for some of this, I really think that it's a matter of priorities because, for instance, the state gave Portland $20 million for graffiti removal. And that's money that could be going toward housing, could be going toward food, could be going toward mental health and addiction recovery, and it's not. And part of that is really us saying as a city that we prioritize having beige walls over having people housed. And that for me is just, it's again, a priority issue. And there are cities in Europe where the graffiti is so beautiful that it actually adds to property values. And so I think that as a city, we need to come together and really think about how are we gonna come up with these priorities? And that requires a lot of communication with the public, a lot of really streamlined communication and community participation. I think that's something that we're really not leveraging as a government. We as even 12, 13 people cannot do all of the things that need to be done in the city. So how do we make it easier for people to participate? How do we help them bring their ideas to the table? And how do we, have daycare for people and have times that are more accessible to people so that we can collaborate as an entire city and not just 12 individuals?
Thank you for that. There's been so many conversations, and I know there's a campaign in the works right now with some great like-minded organizations around participatory budgeting in particular. Just opening it up, let's talk about it. What are the thoughts? So you kind of you hinted a little bit. Maybe I'll pass it to you. Let's talk about participatory budgeting.
Yeah, so I was an early endorser of that campaign. My campaign staff worked on that campaign. I believe in it very, very strongly. And the reason why I do is because the top-down model where you get, in this city historically, it's some rich guys on the west side that get elected historically, and I emphasize guys, and they make a budget and they say this is in our community's best interest. And then time goes on, and maybe it's not in our best interest, but then you never get the public never has the opportunity to say, well, hold on, where's the accountability on costs here? Where were those benefits? Whereas if you flip the script on that and say, well, let's carve out some of that budget and set it aside for direct democracy to flourish, then you can bring in voices who just have not had a voice. And you can say, what would you like to see prioritized? You can experiment, you can try, and you can have a lot of active engagement, and you might see some very impactful programs flourish out of that. And then from that, you can step back holistically and say, that was so good, let's make it a programmatic feature of the mainline budget, right? And so I think it's a huge opportunity for us to kind of make hay while the sun shines. Like, we get this moment where things are changing. Let's give voices to young people. Let's give voices to people of color, people who've just been left out. And see if we can make some inroads on some of our problems. I have a lot of faith that we can. This is a model that works in other parts of the world. We shouldn't be shy to try it. We're already trying new things with our democracy in this town with this whole ranked choice voting, multi-member district thing. So what are we scared of on that?
Thank you. Same question to you. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I was also an endorser of participatory budgeting. As soon as I heard about it, I was like, yes, that's awesome, because I think we really, in addition to all of the other crises that we've touched on and talked about, we're experiencing a crisis of connection. And Portland is one of the most introverted cities in the US. And so really figuring out ways for people to break out of that apathy and find ways to participate is really important. And you have a bigger voter turnout in cities that have participatory budgeting because they care, they're invested, they're talking, they know who their officials are, they know who the community players are. And so I think it's really good to help build this sense of community that we're all kind of lacking because we live in our tiny little houses and a lot of people drive cars and we're not really interacting with very many people. You might even be working from home, right? And so if you have the capacity to participate in your government, in your neighborhood association, and attend town halls and things like that, where you're supported because there's, like I said, daycare options and lots of different times, then we start to see things move and change. We start to build that community. And so, yeah, definitely a strong supporter of that. I was really disappointed to hear that it's been pushed back to 2026 now, I believe. I was really hoping that it would be on the ballot this year, but that's going to give them a lot of time to shore it up and get a lot of research together so that we can really make it as beautiful as it can be. And I think the really beautiful thing, too, for me about participatory budgeting is it gives people under the age of 18 a way to participate in government, which I've been really spending a lot of time thinking about, because our teenage kids who are, managing a lot of climate campaigns even in the city are not able to vote. And that's honestly really heartbreaking, because some of these kids are super educated. And so giving them another way to participate in the government, I think, would be really positive.
Thank you for that. Bro, do you have anything else
I
there?
was just going to say, like,
Please.
I agree. It connects you with that kind of youth piece.
Well, for the viewers and listeners, just let you know, there has been some talk and some campaign work about lowering the age to vote, getting it a little bit lower, letting these youth lead. And I see some excitement. Do you have any thoughts that you want to share? We have some time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just, from personal experience, when I was a kid, I didn't have opportunities where people asked for my opinion. That maybe only my dad, and that had a really big effect on me. And so I'd really, really like us to foster as a community a sense of value in our youth. And I think that just recognizing that they have a valuable perspective to bring to the table when we're talking about intersectionality and intergenerational value. Like, we need to bring youth to the table, we need to bring elders to the table, we need to make sure that we're collaborating, because we each have a different perspective. And there's a lot of ways that, experience is important and it helps us with pattern recognition, but a novel perspective and energy can really bring so much momentum to a community. And so, yeah, for me, I really am almost a little bit biased toward the youth, and especially given that so much of our government is age dominated toward people who have already had their careers, already have their children, already are, have done all of these things and are kind of finishing out their cycle with a political campaign. And I'd really like to see more diversity in terms of age and race and gender identity on the city council, which I think we have a really good chance at this year.
Thank you for that. I'll pass it to you to add some more things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, we give driver's licenses to people who are 16. We trust them with a machine that has the capability of ending people's lives, right? It's a very dangerous thing to do, but it's also an expression, it's a statement to say, hey, you're 16. We trust you with a certain amount of freedom. And it's a big rite of passage for kids, right? It seems arbitrary for me to say, well, you can have this driver's license, go out and be safe. I hope you don't hurt anyone, but you can't vote. I think that's a mistake, and I also think that this like litmus test on like you're 18 now you can vote also ignores the fact that people who are adults maybe aren't voting in a very responsible way either. So I don't think that there's a sort of age piece that's conditional on that. I think we should trust our young people to participate in the democratic process.
Thank you. Before we move on to question 2, I just want to give one last opportunity to maybe weigh in on your plan before we move on. So maybe I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I'm really loving this conversation. First of all, these are great questions, and I think it's really notable that these are questions that are coming up, because they're not asked in all of the other forums that I've been in, and so it's really nice to just spend some time here and really flesh this out, because these are really important issues, and it is just a very diverse set of things that we need to be thinking about as a city.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about community safety? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say that, like, the status quo always gets the benefit of the doubt on the cost-benefit question. So if it's like policing is the norm, no one really says, well, it's too costly, right? We just have to do it. This is an expense we have to do because there's no alternative. Whereas there are real costs associated with that, and we're paying for it right now. This is an approach to public safety that has failed for decades, even longer. And so I think that we owe it to ourselves to kind of question that framing and say, what are the costs we pay right now by not changing our institutions on this? And we owe it to ourselves to invest in an alternative.
Yeah.
Thank you. For the folks who are listening and watching, this is the Reimagine Public Safety debate for Black Portland. I just want to hopefully, encourage you to do some research. Our police budget here in Portland is the largest it's ever been. Despite what you've heard, we have not defunded the police. Imagine Black, we're an abolition organization, so I want to be very clear. If we had defunded the police, we would know. We have not defunded them, and in fact, we've actually increased their budget quite a bit. Again, the largest it's ever been. We're going to dive in a little bit later about this new public safety, community safety office that we have at the City of Portland that came out of 2020. But let's talk a little bit about Portland streets.